Hey everyone, welcome back to the vlog. It's been a couple of weeks just because I was away in Sweden, so I didn't get a chance to post last week. This week we're doing a Q&A vlog. I asked if any of you had any questions and you guys sent me some, so we'll just get on with it. The first one is, why do I use a Pardini air rifle? Back in 2014, I was using, when I first started shooting, I was using my dad's Walther air rifle for a few months. And then when it became apparent that I was going to continue shooting, we needed to get me a better rifle. The Pardini had just been launched at that point. So my dad gave me one out of demo stock to kind of advertise for the company, and I've been shooting that one ever since. Somebody's asking what I would recommend in terms of stretches before shooting prone. Stretches for shooting I think is very individual. Personally, I don't really stretch before I shoot because I'm quite a flexible person. If I stretch before I shoot, then I end up being too bendy. So it really depends on the person. If you're feeling quite stiff in your shoulders for prone, I would suggest some yoga poses. There's one called puppy pose you can look up as a good one for shoulders. There's also one where you can stretch your pec. Quite often people get tight pecs because you're in this position. They're shortened quite a lot of the time. So you can stretch your pecs if you put your elbow against a door frame or something and then kind of push away from it so that you're opening this space. That can be a really good one as well. Any do's and don'ts before shooting? Again, I think that's really individual. If you're somebody who drinks coffee every morning, to then not drink coffee because you're going to shoot is more likely to give you a headache than if you just had another cup of coffee. You'll hear a lot of people tell you not to have caffeine because it gives you the shakes or whatever, but if you're somebody who drinks coffee all the time, it's actually worse to stop drinking coffee than it would be to have another one. On a similar note, you'll hear lots of people tell you not to have sugar, not to have fruit because it can give you glucose spikes and things. It doesn't really bother me much. I'm quite a low energy person, so actually sugar really helps me to kind of get myself up. So you'll see me, especially before a final, eating things like Haribo or like dried fruit and things like that, so it works for me. Cereal bars are actually a really good thing because it's slow release energy, so you'll get it like throughout the day, but really just a balanced healthy diet. How do you manage to balance your studies and your shooting? This one is a big question that I will definitely not be able to answer in one video, but I will do another video on that and the whole thing. It's really mostly about making choices that work for you. I didn't have much of a social life when I was at uni because I just didn't have time. I made choices that meant that I could recover properly from my training sessions, that allowed me to still be alert and awake to do my lectures and stuff. So it's really just making choices that work for you and accepting that those choices are for you and not for anybody else. I've heard, not so much for me, but I heard a lot of other people getting pressured left, right and centre from people to do this or to do that, and not to go out with their friends because then they were not going to train as well. I think it's really important to still have a life and to go out with your friends and like do the fun things. You just have to make those choices and then accept the consequences thereof, whether those are good or bad. Being organised is also a really big one, and having good communication skills with lecturers and other university staff or college staff or school staff, whoever it is, really good communication skills and good organisation. How do you control your heart rate to cope with increased pressure and competition? Breathing is the main one for this. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this before, but breathing is my number one tip for people. Most people think I'm being funny when I say it because of course, like, you have to breathe, but genuinely breathing is the biggest secret within shooting. There's plenty of studies and resources out there that shows like different forms of breathing, different variations of breathing can lower your heart rate, and inversely different other forms of breathing can increase your heart rate. So there are plenty of different ones in there. I don't use any specific technique, but certainly during finals, I really utilise like slow deep breaths, and that tends to keep my heart rate lower. I also want to dispel the myth that you can lower your heart rate. I've heard plenty of people, especially talking about Malcolm Cooper, that he could lower his heart rate to 24. I call bullshit on that. I don't believe it, unless he had an exceptionally low heart rate, resting heart rate. But no, I don't believe that actually exists. You can lower your heart rate to some extent, but if you're extremely nervous, you're going to be able to lower it from 150 to 120. Other than that, it's just about learning how to cope with your heart rate being that high. I'm very lucky that I've got quite a shallow heartbeat, so I don't really see it much in the movement of the rifle. Some people get a lot of pulse. It's really individual. But yes, breathing is the big tip there. How to get over my feelings while I'm shooting? Big secret there is don't. Certainly, like, again, it's not necessarily about making you not nervous or making sure you don't feel this or you don't feel that. It's about learning to manage it. People talk about like learning to deal with distractions. It's not about learning how to not notice the distractions in the first place. It's about what to do once you've noticed that you've been distracted. How do you bring your focus back to what you're doing? Meditation, mindfulness is exactly that. And so if you practice that, it'll come to your shooting. If you practice it in shooting, it'll go the other way around. It's exactly that thing where you notice that your attention's drifted or that your attention's been drawn away to left, right, and centre, and bringing it back to what you're supposed to be focusing on in your shooting. Feelings are just another distraction. It doesn't have to be an external distraction like dog barking, baby crying, something like that. Internal feelings are also a distraction that you can learn to notice and then move away from. It's all about accepting that they're there. You're in a big competition, you're in a small competition, you're really nervous. Okay, you're really nervous. I've accepted that. I still need to focus on the bit that makes me shoot good shots. So, hope that helps. What makes you still like shooting sport? I think because I still have things to learn, I still find it very satisfying when I can make improvements, when I get better, if I shoot a new personal best. Winning's obviously really fun, but I get an awful lot of satisfaction from improving, I guess. How do you deal with extreme heat or extreme cold on the firing point? We'll deal with extreme heat first. In Tokyo, it was ridiculously hot. It was something like 40 degrees and something like 90% humidity. That's very, very hot, especially in those suits that we wear. So I had an ice vest. It's one of these things, it's got all those little crystals that like soak up water. So I soaked it and then we put it in the freezer. So it's a solid ice vest. We took an ice box with us to the range every day that had my ice vest in it, my drinks bottles, some like cold wet scarves and cold wet towels that I could wear on my face. So once I'd finished shooting, I'd put the ice vest on and then I'd cool down a bit. You have to make sure as well to be careful about cooling down too fast, especially if you're really hot and sweaty. You can end up going into shock. So you try and like cool yourself down slowly. One of the pieces of research I heard about was palmar cooling. And so actually a really fast and good way to cool yourself is to cool your palms, and the soles of your feet is another one. I've heard also a lot of things about like cooling your wrist because the blood's closest to the surface at that point. This piece of research was talking about specifically about palmar cooling. I'll see if I can find it and link it below. But yes, for heat I had a cool vest, wet towels to kind of just rub on my face, and those sort of scarf things, and make sure your drinks bottle, I wouldn't have the drinks bottle too cold. If you're really, really hot and you start drinking very cold water, it can kind of shock your system a little bit. If you get like cold is still fine. You don't have to drink like room temperature water, which I have heard. But yeah, like freezing cold water when you're boiling, just be careful with it. In terms of extreme cold, I've also shot in the snow before, so I've had a bit of both. Woolly hat. If you're somebody who doesn't normally wear ear defence can actually be quite good to keep your ears warm. Woolly hat, I have a buff that's like fleecy lined. I don't always like to shoot in it because I find it gets in the way of the butt plate a little bit, but if I'm freezing, then the buff being in the way of the butt plate is better than me shaking, which happens. I've also got underlayers that are like thermal underlayers. We have to be careful with what you can put on under the suit because you're only allowed a certain thickness, and the suit you still have to pass overlap. But you can get slightly thicker underlayers than the sort of thinner ones you can get, and so there's variations there as well. I've got heated socks. I've never shot a competition with them, so I actually don't know what the rules would be around that, but for training, I've got heated socks that's got a battery pack to keep my feet warm. I've got very poor circulation, so I get very cold feet all the time. So that helps. If I am shooting, then sort of that whole thermal socks thing keeps my feet warm. Hand warmers, having a hand warmer inside your hat, especially if you're shooting something like prone or kneeling, having a hat next to you with a hand warmer in it, you can put your trigger finger in there and warm up a little bit so you don't have a numb trigger finger. You can get contact gloves to shoot in. You can get full length gloves. I personally really hate full length gloves even when I'm cold. I just don't like the feeling while I'm shooting, but you can get those. So yeah, there's a lot of things. You can also have like flasks of hot soup or hot liquid tea, whatever, and drink that. And again, like don't glug it down if you're really, really cold. Don't glug down a hot drink that like sips throughout the day that'll keep you a bit warmer, things like that. So I hope that helps. What's your workout routine for shooting? I don't really have one for shooting specifically. It's more of a just all-round general like fitness routine, I guess. I have a lot of interest in sort of I guess, calisthenic gymnastic movements. I'm learning how to handstand at the moment. I'm very into yoga, so a lot of my like fitness stuff is based around that. But I also just want to be a bit stronger. I've had a lot of problems with my legs and stuff with my arthritis, so my legs are actually quite weak compared to the rest of my body, so I work on my legs quite a lot. It's just a full, like, all-round workout that I really enjoy. Tips and tricks for upcoming shooters. I guess that piece about learning how to notice distractions and coming back from it, that's probably one of the major ones that you could practice. Away from the range, at the range, it's really just basics. It's always basics. You work on getting your triggering better, your follow through, your approach. It should come straight down to the target, not in this sort of V. If you see on a scat tracer or an optel, whatever you use, if you can see that your sort of approach you've got on average is like this, then work on getting it to this, work on getting it to this, and then work on getting it straight, like things like that. It's all pretty generic, really. What should a shooter's preparation be before a competition? Again, I'm sorry I keep saying it, but it's super individual. For me, I make sure I get enough rest and things so that I'm sort of fresh for the competition. I try and have a good healthy diet beforehand so I don't feel sluggish or anything like that. I've got a packing list to make sure that I've got all the stuff that I need for my competition so that I don't forget to pack anything. Yeah, that's it really. How many hours do I train a week? Usually, or at least I used to train sort of probably 25 to 30 hours a week. I train about 5 hours a day for shooting specifically. Now I do an awful lot less than that. I'm probably on not even 10 hours a week at this point, just because I'm away so often at the moment, really. But yeah, like I'm only in 2 or 3 days a week these days. Why Pardini and G&E? I already addressed the Pardini one, I guess. I love my Pardini, it's so good. I did, back in, I think it was 2016, I tried a Walther. I can't remember which kind of rifle I used, but I tried a Walther for a few months. And it wasn't bad. I tried the electronic trigger, which I did quite like, but the stock, it just didn't really fit me, and I went back to the Pardini and it just felt like home. So I've never gone away from it since. Grunig, I used to shoot in Anschutz, and for a while I shot in a Grunig stock. When we had enough money, or when I got good enough, my parents helped me buy a Grunig barrel just because they were the best ones on the market at the time. And subsequently, Grunig have very kindly sponsored me a few times. So I just keep using their products because I think they're the best. Nothing more to it than that. How do rifles and ammo get transported during the flights? So when we go to the airport, it's just the same as you would normally check in. You go up to the desk and you say, I've got a firearm to check in. And they normally go, oh, I've never done a firearm before. And then eventually you'll get somebody, probably the supervisor, who comes along and they'll give you some forms to fill in, and you fill in the forms. They put a special tag on your bag that says it's a firearm, and they attach some of the forms to that. You get some of the forms, they keep some of the forms. And then you normally go to, here it's bulky baggage, other places I've seen it's special baggage, and you drop it off with them. They x-ray it and then they take it away, and that's easy. Depending on the airline, you have to pay a special fee to have it handled. Heathrow Airport have got a extortionate baggage handling fee for firearms that nowhere else in the country has. British Airways cost the most. EasyJet are the easiest in terms of check-in and cost-wise, but if you are changing on EasyJet, then you have to collect all the baggage and do it again wherever your stop-off is. With British Airways, if you're connecting somewhere, then they just check it all the way through. So it really depends on the airline. Coming back from Sweden was super easy because they're so used to, because they're a biathlon country, they're so used to having firearms, it was super easy. They all knew what they were doing. So it's really just, it's quite easy. You just got extra paperwork to do. Do you have a script that you rehearse or visualise for each shot? I do a bit. I wouldn't say I run through it sort of as a script. It's not so much like pick up rifle, move rifle across, bring rifle down. It's not so detailed. I do visualise that process of like moving the gun across. We practice it, like I've done it thousands and thousands of times so that I know what to do and bring the rifle across and all this kind of thing. There's a whole process. Most of it's automatic. A mental program, again, not really. It's just about that whole noticing distractions and things like that. I have to really kind of notice how I am on any given day before I start shooting. Like if I'm in a day where my head's a bit scrambly and I'm just really easily distracted that day, then that's fine. I just need to be aware of that and then be more diligent on it. If I've got other days where I'm feeling really tired, then I need to prepare that that's what I need to deal with. So it's really just about noticing where you are on any given day. When you're in a competition and you see you're on for what could be a PB, how do you stop thinking about it so that you don't kind of distract yourself from it? This has happened to me many times. You get like milestones, I guess, as you go along. For me, more recently, my milestone before the World Championships had been 6:30. That was my next milestone, and I was struggling to do it because quite a lot of the time I would see at the end of the 5th string that I was going to get like 6:30, and I'd end up with something like 6:29.8 because I fired a bad shot in my last string, or my last string was poorer than all my other strings. And it got easier for me once I got that milestone. Then 6:30 was easy and I could do it tons of times. The next milestone for that was 6:32, and then after that was 34, and the next one for me is 36. But once you've done it once, it becomes really easy and you can do it again. It's really, again, it's that piece about internal distractions. So that whole like noticing your feelings and doing the process anyway, it's that you just have to notice that you're being distracted by the score and say, okay, I'm being distracted by the score. We still have to do the process. So it's just the same old thing. It's just the same thing, but for a ton of different situations. For UK shooting, what advice do I have for joining the UK national team? It depends what event you're in. If you're shooting prone, unfortunately, I have not got a clue. There's a whole process, I guess. I think it's with the NSRA in terms of shooting prone. If you want to make I'm going to get all the names wrong, but the Pershing team and stuff like that, there's a whole process to that, and it involves postal competitions and juror trials, and I actually have no idea about that. In terms of like Olympic style stuff, if you're a sort of younger athlete, there's a pathway, there's the talent pathway. The British shooting website will lay out like what scores you need to hit at what competitions to get onto the talent pathway, and then that goes up to academy, podium, and academy, podium potential, and podium. There's a tier. It's all on the British shooting website as to what scores and where it takes you up that tier. If you're in Scotland and Wales, at least I know they've got their own home country programmes that feed into that, and also have their own tier programmes. I don't know what England's system is at the moment, and I have absolutely not got a clue about Northern Ireland or any of the islands, I'm afraid, so I can't help you there. But yeah, if you're talking about Olympic shooting, then it's all laid out on the British shooting website, and there's certain competitions and certain scores you have to meet in order to kind of like climb your way up the tier system. If you're talking about sort of prone, Pershing type stuff, not got a clue. Currently shooting a 97 average roughly, trying to increase it towards a 98, 99 average. I've only been shooting for about 6 months, so I'm not sure how I would go ahead with doing that. Do you have any advice? Really just keep doing what you're doing, I suppose. I suspect if you can shoot a 97 average, that means that you can no bother shoot a 98, 99 average, and it's just distractions, whether that's external or internal, that's popping those little ones out. In which case I would just practice that whole like noticing the distractions and then doing the process anyway. If you don't know what your process is, that's a good thing to work on as well, is really like, I guess, noticing the process, like what makes a good shot. Try not to focus on the bad shots and like what you're doing wrong to make the bad shots. Try and focus on what is a good shot and how do I do that more consistently. How do I stay calm in finals? I don't, is the big secret there. I 100% don't stay calm in finals. Finals are very nerve-wracking, finals are very scary, especially ones that have got quota places on them. It's that whole breathing piece again, I'm afraid. I do lots of deep breathing. You can kind of see it on some of the finals actually, in between the shots. I'm quite lucky that there's a bit of like chatting and stuff in between the shots, because I take that time to really like do my deep breathing and calm my heart rate down. And then once they say for your next competition shot load, I'm then really like focused again on doing the process right for this shot, and it's just one shot at a time. That's all you can ever do, actually in everything, like all matches, not just finals, but it's very easy to do it in finals because they're one shot at a time. You just focus on doing one shot right at a time. If one of them goes a bit tits up, then that's fine, you can't really do anything about it, ignore it and move on, make sure the next one's good, I guess. But yes, it's again that whole breathing piece. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of having your dad as a coach? That's a really good question. The advantages of having my dad as a coach, he knows me very, very well, so he can tell if I'm not having a good day, if I'm lying to myself about not having a good day, things like that. Like if I'm not feeling well, he trusts me, I guess, because he knows me so well. He can trust me to say, I'm too tired for this today, or I really don't feel well today. Then he trusts me and he accepts that, and we work out how to do with that. Equally well, he can tell if I need a bit of a pep talk, things like that. Like he just knows me so well, he knows how to deal with me. It's also really good because we can chat about things that aren't like shooting related. We've got a lot of common interests, like Dad's really into music, I'm really into music. We chat about that, like we chat about comic books, we chat about loads of stuff. And just because like we're really close, like he's one of my best friends as well, so it's a really good thing to have in there. Disadvantages of having your dad as your coach: he knows me really well, so you can't really get much past him. Sometimes it's hard to feed back if he's doing something that's unhelpful. It's hard to feed back because you don't want to upset your dad. There's not very many disadvantages to having my dad as my coach, to be honest, I guess. With other people, there's maybe a bit of a reputation thing, so I get kind of painted with the same brush as him. Quite often people will assume that we've got the same opinions because we're father and daughter and not bother to ask me, which actually, like, in a lot of cases isn't true. Like, not to mention that we're two different people. He's also a different generation to me. He's male, I'm female, and so there's a lot of reasons why we wouldn't have the same opinions on certain things. But yeah, quite regularly, because we're father and daughter, people will ask him his opinion and then just not bother to ask me because they think that we'll have the same opinion. But yeah, I don't think there's that many disadvantages to having your father as your coach. At least not with me. Like, I'm sure I've met a few other sort of daddy-daughter, coach-athlete relationships, not just within shooting. I've met a few others in different sports, and I think there's different kind of nuances for every different set, I guess, and that's just because people are different. Thank you very much for everybody who sent in questions. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you took something from it. If you do have any other questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below, and I will try and answer them. And as always, have fun, and I will see you next time. Bye!